another episode of GovTech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And what we're going to do is bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Today we're going to be talking about telework. And as that is a divisive concept in society today, it's going on all around the country, private business, and then .gov. What are we seeing today in California government with regard to telework? What is the status today?
It's a hybrid model today, at least at the state of California. And I'm really finding in most places, it has its positives and its negatives that we'll get into. The pandemic fundamentally changed the way that people work in offices. So we went overnight from pretty much 100% in person. I don't know that there was a single job in state government that was like, you can just work from home.
I remember there were some where we would have maybe a Friday work from home, but you would earn up to that, or it would be some sort of, you were a special category to get that one day, maybe one day a month on a Friday you could work from home.
It just didn't exist in government before this. It was very much butts in seats. That's how you worked. That's how you managed. That's how government worked. And overnight, we were 100% remote or really close to it. And I think it's fundamentally shifted the way that everyone is going to expect to work from now on. It's definitely gone back. It's rolled back to a more hybrid approach. Most state departments are a couple days a week in person, a couple days at home. Some are 3 days in person or 4 days in person. Everyone can work from home on Fridays. But I think it's a problem when you have every single department with a different policy.
A lot of different ways to think about this, but I've seen the impact downtown. So the studio and my offices are downtown, and I was coming in every day during the pandemic. And so I saw it go from busy, bustling downtown to eerie ghost town. And it was like that for 2+ years. It was more than 2 years before I ever came in and had to park other than the first floor in my parking garage.
Right.
It was dead downtown. And state workers were a big part of all of that traffic. For downtown, we're in Sacramento. Downtown Sacramento, hugely impacted by that. And I've seen the impact on small businesses and that sort of thing. But our focus for our conversation today is thinking about the impact from two perspectives. One, on the impact on sort of the delivery of government services, and then the impact on state employment and just how projects are managed internally. So does that make sense? It's different.
Totally.
One is how are the services delivered to the consumers of government services, and then what's the impact on the people who are actually delivering all of those services? So if we can, you mentioned all the different agencies were having different work from home schedules. As someone who interacts daily with state employees, how does that impact how you do what you do?
And not just that, but like, how does it impact, as you said, their ability to work as a team? A friend of mine, her son just got a job at the state, and he had offers from 2 different departments. And the differentiator for him, he's coming into the workforce for the first time. He wanted to be in the office. And so his choice was to go to the department that offered more in-person work. He wants to learn by doing, by meeting people, by interacting. But honestly, most of the time it's the opposite. Like, I have to come to the office 3 times a week. I don't want to. I'm going to go to this other department, do a very similar job. I'm an analyst or something that's transferable across departments. I'm going to go over to that department where they let me telework 4 or 5 days a week. I'm seeing departments play themselves against each other for a lot of this. There was one department that they were requiring pretty early on 3 days a week in the office. It was a leadership decision. We've got to be here 3 days a week. And there was just a mass exodus of employees. This is at the time when no other departments were requiring people to come, honestly, at all in person. And this one department had a huge flux of employees that just left. They were like, forget this. I'm going to go to this other department. I don't ever have to come in. It saves people a ton of time. California is doing great stuff in tracking it, but the sort of sporadic policies from department to department are not, in my opinion, serving them super well.
I want to be respectful of our audience, particularly those with .com email addresses who might not be familiar with the state system and how employees would move. So why don't you just describe the civil service system a bit, how it works and how people with certain job classifications might work anywhere in state government.
I mean, once you're in, right? And switching to jobs at other departments is fairly easy. So you climb the ranks, you start as an office technician and you promote to a staff services analyst and then promote to an associate government programs analyst. And maybe within one of those classes, there's like a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3. That's how the state classifies and how they work. For those generalist classifications, it's similar in IT too. Like they have IT manager 1 and 2 and 3. And those classifications exist at every state department and agency.
So if I'm an IT manager 1 and my department goes to 3 to 1, I just log on to my computer and I start scanning for
IT manager one
in
fully
any
remote,
state
right?
agent, fully remote. That's all I'm interested in. And if I want to attract talent, I figure out what it is, their preferred work schedule, and advertise for that and recruit to that. And I'm pulling between state agencies. Wait a minute. I don't want my employees as a state agency. What kind of leverage do I have to keep my employee in their seat if I want them to stay and I don't want them to transfer to somewhere else in state government?
And then there's equity issues, right? So if you offer 5 days a week telework, you never have to come in to Russell, who's an ITM1. You have to offer it to all of your ITM1s. That's what's fair. You can't say, Jen, you're an ITM1 too, the same classification as Russell. You work in the same office, but we're going to let Russell work from home all the time. Maybe Jen sucks at her job. Right. She requires way more management than Russell. And no, but Jen, we're going to make you come in 3 days a week. We want to keep an eye on you. That's not how it works. That would be a union complaint and a meeting and a negotiation. So it's difficult. I get it.
Sounds like a management nightmare.
Right?
A management nightmare. My employees have a variety of different work schedules and adjustments and what works for them and for me and for the company and our clients. I'm trying to think I can pick one and that's the one. That would not work for me.
And then even from a team building productivity standpoint, I'm very close to a state employee and he told me we have to go in 2 days a week to the office. And I said, oh, that makes sense. Does everyone come in on those 2 days? And he was like, no, you get to pick whatever 2 days you want. And I'm like, okay, so like today, like you went in, who was there? I was alone. I'm sitting in my office, taking Zoom calls alone in my government leased space.
That kind of defeats the purpose of coming in. When I think of it, team building and that interaction that happens in an office when we're all together, there's a certain energy that that's what I want to facilitate.
Yeah, it's totally pointless. And that employee just wasted their commute time, their getting ready time when they could have just been hammering out work or taking more Zoom calls at home. I know.
Doing the same thing at home. That's not, I think when people talk about being in the office, we didn't mean a butt in a seat. We meant a collaborative experience. And if that's not happening, that's a problem.
I think people are picking up on the problems with that issue. And so most departments and agencies that I've talked to have like an anchor day or look, everyone on our team is going to come in on Mondays. Sorry, it is what it is. Deal with it. And then it's, if you want to come in another day a week, if there's people like Russell that want to work in their office every day, you can. The space is here, but we're not all going to do that.
So how does the state's IT system facilitate this kind of diversity across state agencies and departments and how's this work?
In the beginning of that pandemic, when everyone shifted from mostly 100% in the office to 100% remote overnight was a huge lift from the IT industry. It was like, you've got to establish VPNs, you need devices, you need laptops, you need security for home, you need some guidance to these people. Like all of a sudden their home is their office now. How does that work with workers' comp? Is that their workplace now? Do we need to give them a stipend? What if people don't have internet at home? There's all these questions that came up literally overnight. And the IT industry did a fabulous job of accommodating that. You had people providing laptops, hundreds, thousands of laptops overnight. You had people bending the rules. So this required wet signatures. It doesn't now. We're done with that. We're not coming in person. But there were still departments that were like, and there still today are departments very paper driven. It's like you can't get around it. So I have to go in. I'm not going in at all. This is the height of the pandemic. But I've got to go in and drop my time card off that I fill out by hand.
How did that you said IT solution, and I had in mind the state IT system facilitating comms and communications and that sort of thing. But you rattled off between devices and security and VPNs, those sort of things. What was the interaction between .gov and .com in facilitating this transition? What did that look like?
It really was a crisis situation. Thank God for emergency contracting waivers, but it was overnight. Who has devices that can get them to us? Right. So you're calling on your state contract holders. It's the Dells, the HPs, the device people. Like, we're going to need an additional 1,000 laptops that we weren't expecting. We're going to need cloud service providers. Nothing has done more for movement to the cloud than the pandemic. It was like overnight, all of a sudden, you know what? Everything's in a cloud now. You're not even on site. So everything has to be in the cloud. So it really was like rolling up the sleeves, getting things done, everyone coming to the table, not even asking or worrying at the time about, hey, how are we going to get paid for this? Or can I increase my prices to you? There was none of that. It was like, how can we help as a community? Because look, a functional government is in everyone's best interest, right? Like, we don't want 220,000 state employees sitting at home twiddling their thumbs. Nobody wants that. So it was like, how can we help? And that's really what's beautiful about the industries that serve government is they have a vested interest in making it work because they're all in clients and customers and citizens at the end of the day.
We have to get a guest on to describe ground zero, stay home, when that order hit, and then the evolution. I'd love a blow by blow while it's still fresh in people's memory. We'll noodle on who that might be. The in-person requirements in contracting, it limits who's going to apply.
Totally.
It increases cost, but there are benefits or some perceived benefits. I know in the private sector, you have companies like Facebook that you got to come back in and it's creating some stresses. There's some ins and outs, but some people are seeing some benefits. How's the state navigating that in your mind?
Pre-pandemic, the in-person requirements were pretty much in any services contract that the state put out, right? We're going to hire a bunch of people from your team. We want them in our office with us. Now, and through the pandemic, it wasn't like that. They were like, no, please don't come in. And what it did is it opened up a much larger, more competitive market. So one of my clients won a bid and it came out of left field. And everyone was like, I didn't know they had people that knew about X, Y, and Z here. And I said, oh, they're not here. That's the beauty of the pandemic. They pulled a team from the East Coast, from Florida, from New York, and they got the best of the best. Like, this A team is from a much larger pool than the willing to travel to Sacramento for 4 days a week to be in person A team, right? It opens up like a ton more candidates that have national, international experience in these things. So the push, plus they don't have to charge them for travel expenses. The state can't pay travel expenses directly, but you better believe these vendors, they bake it into their rates. We're going to have to pay for this somehow. My push to the state has been, if this worked and it worked well, keep going with that in your contracts. You're getting better quality individuals that'll work on your projects. You're getting lower rates because you're not having to pay for them to come to Sacramento every single week. And you guys aren't even in the office every day. Why do you want your vendors to have to be?
So on that kind of policy procurement, that's some fascinating insight into the procurement process in an understated way that the state might have its dollars just go farther by eliminating a certain requirement or a procurement. Is that done on a policy-wide basis through DGS? Is that pushed by someone in state government, or is that more an agency by agency as the RFP is drafted?
It is. It's project by project, situation by situation, because there are some instances where it's, we actually do need these guys here, like 4 or 5 days a week. And that's fine. Like for those instances, sure, that makes sense. These guys are willing to do it. Like they've been doing it for decades, whether it's I'm going to fly into town for 4 days a week, or I'm going to move here, or I'm going to live at the Residence Inn for 5 months. But when you look at the downsides and the upsides that you have by not requiring it or baking it in automatic, we've got to have you in person. It's like, really look at the reasons. Do you have to have them in person? Because if you don't, there's a lot of benefits to that.
Let me ask you a little bit. This may be one of those questions that's more interesting to me than most of our audience, but you do a lot of advocacy on behalf of your clients, agency by agency, project by project, their needs, and presenting those to the state. What's this kind of reform? This is a kind of reform that it benefits everyone. It certainly benefits your clients, but it benefits everybody. Where's the venue for that sort of broad, good government, best practices, procurement advocacy? Where's a forum for doing it?
I think it is with the control agencies. And like I've had this exact discussion with our chief procurement officer and our CIO at the state level. They're aware of this and who disagrees with that? It's common sense. But at the same time, the balance of control versus customer service, it's like, I can think this is great policy. All of the leaders at the state level can think it's great policy, but everyone's a little apprehensive to make it a blanket policy or a you must policy, because there are those certain instances and no one wants to get caught being the one project that fails because I was listening to them, but they said I could do X. And it's like,
this didn't work for this project. It needed to be a more interactive dialogue between state employees and the contractor.
And then the finger pointing happens, right? Whose fault is that? Is it the vendors? Maybe it's because we didn't require them to be here in person.
Right.
Maybe this would have been successful if they were butts in seats the way things used to be. And whose fault is that? Who made that decision? No one wants to ultimately be the one that causes something to fail.
Well, California is not the only state to go through this. This happened. We all went through COVID together or at the same time. We were in the same ocean, maybe on different boats. People were impacted differently. How is this looking in other states? How are other states navigating?
Even other .govs, like in total, right? The federal government pre-pandemic had a more liberal stance on teleworking. They did have jobs that were 100% remote. When you consider they serve the entire nation and they're headquartered in Washington, D.C., it makes more sense, right? You want workers from all across the United States. Some of them have to be remote if that's how you want that to work. But even they are clawing these employees back into the office. There's issuance out of the White House that says this fall, we're going to try to be more in person. Other states have gotten super creative with it. So I've worked with a government official in Virginia. And when I called him, every time I've talked to him over the pandemic, he's been in Florida. And I was finally like, what? Why do you spend so much time in Florida? And he said, I live here. I'm like, wait, you're the director of a Virginia State Department and you live in Florida? And he said, it works. It's totally fine. I fly up there once a quarter. We have our meetings. But yeah, I don't need to live in Virginia to serve Virginia. Now, that's forbidden here in California. You have to be a resident of the state to hold a state job. Otherwise, we would all live across the border in Nevada with our better tax rates. But other states really are getting pretty creative. Some of them have said, we're going to go completely remote. Sorry, downtown corridors and businesses, but we're going to save a ton of money on real estate. That's another big issue, and you hit on it a little bit, but the state is a big landlord in downtown Sacramento. So when all of those people are working from home, Do you need to keep spending money on state buildings? Is there some opportunity for savings in leases and even in state-owned buildings? Is there an opportunity for reuse like we're seeing right now with EDD and the Capital Corridor, where we're looking at repurposing a lot of that?
There's three
need
major office buildings,
Right.
state office buildings on a major thoroughfare leading into Sacramento that could be transformative for downtown as those are transitioned into apartments and retail spaces. It could be transformative for downtown Sacramento.
Those departments will need space somewhere else, but will they need as much square footage? Is there hoteling options? The technology's there also to help facilitate this, where I log on, I book my desk, I'm going to be in these 2 days. I can share that desk with someone that's going to be in on the other 2 days, but it's a different mindset from property use and space utilization than it ever has been before.
Huge challenge for a lot of people to sort this out. The impact on work from home and telework, and what do we even call it? The local economy, where do we go to lunch, the flow of traffic, the interaction. It's something as dramatic as this is something we're all going to sort through, and I don't think we're going to resolve it in a little half-hour conversation on GovTech today. But when you think about the IT impacts, the shift to the cloud, the things that have been facilitated, we largely ironed them out during the pandemic, but there's more to come. The governor just issued an executive order on AI. How do you see, what's your crystal ball say as far as this shift that's occurred? How are we going to navigate these next few months? What do you think?
I'm optimistic that it really is going to require a shift in management style from the way that most of us in the private sector manage, which is I don't care what hours my team works. I really don't. I don't care if they are 20 minutes late. I don't care if they have a dentist appointment or something to do with their kids. I care that they get their job done and that they do it well. And to me, that's how I want our government to be managed as well. And I think we are shifting to more of a managed by results, managed by production, managed by the work that your employees do versus their butts are in their seat. They're in front of their computer for 8 hours a day. It's a punishment to super efficient employees, right? It was like, if I finish my job in 5, what do I do for the next 3 hours? Managing by results, I think, is going to be a big shift in the mindset of government. But I think that's where you have to go to be able to do this. And it's not even, I'm going to watch Microsoft Teams and make sure that little light is green for all of my employees that are working from home. Come on, you're making way too difficult of a job out of managing these people. Manage by results. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful as a manager, and it's a lot less stressful on your employees, especially the competent ones, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And on that hopeful note, we'll end this episode of GovTech today. I hope everyone got some use out of it.
Absolutely.